There are just things you can do in Aptos you can't do elsewhere. So when you think about like Econia's order book, their centralized, their cloud, it is something that can't be achieved anywhere else because of the fact that Aptos has the fastest performance shared state out there. And it uses something called dynamic parallelism to enable as much concurrency in the network as possible. And so the kind of throughput you can get on trading assets on something like an Econia just can't be done elsewhere in the industry. And that we think is important because
today's guest is Avery Ching, the co-founder and CEO of Aptos Labs. This episode is part of quarterly webinars that Token Relations does with Aptos. So I'm excited to catch up again a few months later after we last spoke in Seoul during Aptos Experience in September. Avery, it's great to have you here.
It's great to be here, Jacqueline.
For sure. And to start off, I want to discuss some numbers and looking back at 2024. Obviously, Aptos made a huge splash. The network partnered with a number of massive institutions like BlackRock, Tether, Bitwise, to name a few. And additionally, in the past quarter, I believe Aptos hit a TVL of 1.8 billion and saw more than 1.1 million daily active addresses, making it the second fastest growing ecosystem behind Solana, according to that Electric Capital developer report, which is pretty impressive.
Yeah, it's been a very busy time for 2024 for us. As you mentioned, a lot of institutions starting to think about Aptos as a place to store their real world assets, both Franklin Templeton, BlackRock, and others to come in that space with the Biddle Fund. We've been super excited about seeing the growth in overall ecosystem development start to take off the latter part of Q4. As you mentioned, Aptos hit some pretty massive records in terms of daily active addresses. With I think even now today it's like 1.3 million, which is just crazy. I think it's among the top 2 or 3 amongst Web3 chains. But we're also seeing massive improvements in the infrastructure side and the user experience, which we're excited about. So in 2024, we were able to demonstrate the user end-to-end latency. So this is the time in which, say, you go to a web page or you hit your app and you now want to interact with the blockchain, not just the blockchain piece in time itself. We could do that sub-second easily now. And that's just a great user experience because the most average websites and most applications you go to take about 2.5 seconds to kind of refresh. And so that shows that blockchain can actually be a part of that workflow in a very seamless way and have a lot of different kinds of interactions and opportunities. Super excited to see from the Electric Capital report, as you mentioned, the second fastest growing developer ecosystem, overall number 1 fastest move developer growing ecosystem. And that's a testament to, I think, a lot of the hard work that the ecosystem team has done to go and have events in different places, hackathons. And I think there was a global hackathon as well called Co-Collision, which had massive traction across the board and some amazing projects that really came out of it. So I think the other point to note is that projects have not just been building, but they've been also raising really well. I think more than over $150 million has been collectively raised by Aptos ecosystem projects, which allows us to kind of see that ecosystem grow by leaps and bounds faster than just the grant program from the Aptos Foundation. So pretty excited about where it sets us off for 2024. And then 2025, I think is going to be a massive, massive shift in terms of so many different things.
Yeah, I mean, we have so much to talk about here. And I want to start off with, I know Aptos hit its 2-year anniversary back in mid-October. And we've talked in the past about how one of the goals for the network was to have a huge impact on the broader economy by making payments faster and more reliable. With that said, how do you measure that growth over the past 2 years? And where do you kind of see this going from here?
So I think one of the key things for us to move the needle in payments is, of course, getting stable coins on Aptos. And so we're the only move chain today that has both USDC and USDT natively supported on the network. And that unlocks so many doors for us, having those 2 of the largest stablecoins out there, driving value and driving adoption across the board. And so when you see the projects like Cajun and Stan, the space that are very large infrastructure projects, and they can start to integrate payments directly into them, or you see the way the DeFi ecosystem is starting to really leverage the fastest and cheapest dollars in the world to kind of do things around yield, around trading, around different ways of investing in those markets and those assets. It is starting to kind of take place. And so in 2025, you're going to see, like, I think now that we've got these stables unlocked, a lot of the payments corridors that are very interesting in Africa and emerging countries, as well as places in LATAM, start to pick up adoption and take advantage of the kind of infrastructure that Aptos provides.
Mm-hmm. Well, and what are some other certain aspects you think that have fulfilled the Aptos mission to date in these past 2 years, and what else needs to be done? Maybe you kind of touch on what already needs to be done, but I'm curious if there's other sectors aside from payments that fulfill that.
Sure. So the long-term goal of what Aptos is trying to build is a decentralized kind of internet for everybody to play with. And right, so that workspace is more than 5 billion people today using the internet. They use it in kind of the way it's been built today, which is very centralized amongst a small number of parties. But our belief is that that should augment with Web3, and that as we think about how we interact with different internet websites and different products, they should all have kind of Web3 elements integrated with them, so that assets can be owned by users. Kind of the way those assets are used and transacted with in other applications is kind of determined by users with much more control. And also that these assets can be then trustlessly and kind of permissionlessly traded amongst each other. And there's a lot of value that happens when an asset moves from one person to another. When you gift me something, or you sell me something, or we can interact on an application and kind of share something. And that can be done in a way that is a immutable global ledger that no one can dispute, that everyone kind of agrees on is the source of truth. And that changes the way we think about how we operate within this world. And so that's a kind of our long-term broad mission. And the area we feel is really ripe for disruption is in the area of finance in general. Mm-hmm. So we talked through payments a bit. Having those stables on board allow us to move the cheapest and fastest dollars around the world. The other areas, I think, trading. So trading infrastructure, I think Aptos is definitely the best place for it from an infrastructure standpoint. It is the most scalable. I think that was demonstrated through last year, kind of holding the top 4 records for daily transactions. It is the most performant in terms of latency, the fastest consensus protocols out there, which allows you to kind of get that sub-second transaction finality times, even from a user experience, not just from a blockchain-based experience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know. Yeah. Oh, I was going to say, in the past, you've talked about user latency and making sure payment speeds are comparable to the time that it takes to load a website, which is hopefully like that. In terms of how Aptos looks at this, what kind of things are you making strides to accomplish for that mission, and then optimizing for both minimal latency while scaling to meet that high transaction throughput that these payments have?
Exactly. And I think one of the things that's happened, I think we touched on last year, was the ability to show that in a preview net with the latest version of the software, Aptos could kind of demonstrate more than 2 billion transactions in a single day, payments transactions. And this is, bigger than MasterCard, Visa, and every other credit card network put together. Mm-hmm. And so the scale is definitely there. And from a cost model, Aptos is the lowest entry fees for payments. It's going to be a fraction of like 1/10 of a cent or 100th of a cent, which is very, very low. And this allows you to do novel things in this space as well. So for instance, if you want to do micropayments or streaming payments, like, you're a podcaster, obviously you have a huge audience. If you want to provide you tips at the very low granularity, maybe at a cent or 1/10 of a cent, it's actually still economically feasible to do it on Aptos because the fees are so low. Mm-hmm. It also enables things like if you want to support deep in networks that have very high fine granular payments. An example would be if you think about AWS. AWS charges on a per hour, per 50-minute basis for usage of its machinery and compute. You can do that at a very fine granular in Aptos because those fees are so low. And so it just opens up a broad swath of economic opportunities, new payment models that weren't available in the past. And doing it with, again, USDT and USDC unlocks many doors for developers as well as users.
Mm-hmm. Do you think you'll bring in more stable coins to the Aptos network?
I think that's definitely inevitable. And I think overall FX trading on stables is something that's going to be very interesting for a lot of parties going forward in the future.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. I also called you CEO in the intro, which you are, in fact, the CEO, but yes, that's a fairly new title for you. Congrats. For those who don't know, Avery recently transitioned from CTO to the role of CEO after his co-founder, Moshe, stepped down to an advisory role. How are you feeling? Let's start there.
I'm feeling good. It goes without saying that Mo obviously helped scale the company and ecosystem today and championed a lot of innovation in Web3. Right. That being said, I think it's good, that I get a chance to go and make some significant changes in the way we operate, specifically how we think about building and growing the ecosystem. In the last 15 days, we've done a lot of work just a year. Of course, that started a little bit before that as well, but there's been a new ecosystem team kind of movement from labs to foundation, with Ash taking the helm, growing the ecosystem, 10x that we could talking about that. That's a big focus for us. And how we're going to do that is really doubling down on community and ecosystem. It's going to be the hard work of sourcing developers, helping them build with Move, better documentation, better tooling. really that white glove support for especially the strongest teams out there. And everything is about how do we take advantage of those capabilities that Aptos provides, the visions of these entrepreneurs, and kind of merge them into a world where now they can able to develop the most innovative and interesting products for the market. Um, we're also thinking really hard about a regional approach. We've had huge success in places like India. I think in just like under a year, there are more than 40 projects building in India, more than 500 developers out there. And this is accomplished with a very, very lean team. And a lot of this was accomplished because of the ability to kind of, not only showcase the talents and technical abilities of what Aptos can do, but having that local presence where that connection is just so, so important for developers to get to know each other, help each other out, even help with code reviews and development efforts and hackathons. And we want to see that replicated across different parts of the world. So seeing that happen in China, in Vietnam, and also in the US, especially with the change in administration in places like New York and Palo Alto and others, we have Aptos presence. So really, really excited about those things.
Yeah, I feel like we could talk about the regional differences, and we will definitely talk about ecosystem growth and everything. Given that it is your first year as CEO, there's a lot of moving parts, as you've noted. What are the main things that you really want to accomplish in 2025?
Our probably our number one objective here is just grow ecosystem. We have a great base of technology. We've got great institutions. We've got stable coins. We've got a lot of validation that the network is primed as an enterprise grade product and infrastructure right now. With that, it's time to really develop those innovative products on the ecosystem that are going to move the needle for us. And so I talked a little bit about the regional strategy. I talked a little bit about how the foundation is now beefing up its team to kind of grow that space, and how labs will do everything it can to kind of complement that. The other thing I think that's going to be interesting is, how do we help builders in all different kind of regional strategies? So, for instance, a developer in India might want a small grant to get started, develop something towards mainnet. A developer in China might need help to kind of talk to different exchanges or different partners or local investors in that region. And so that regional focus is something that we're really, really excited about in terms of developing ecosystem a lot quicker. And the last thing is just now that we kind of built out the best infrastructure from a kind of more systems, like more scalable, better latency, and better, most cheapest costs, we want to start to push forward in certain avenues, like in the finance space, in terms of the moving up the stack. And that I think is going to be very exciting to see kind of what blockchain can really do when it starts to get focused and targeted on specific verticals and locales. So those areas are we're particularly excited about: trading, about money movement and payments, and then kind of about the real world assets.
In regards to the foundation and the lab side, is there anything that you want to do differently than what was happening before, or are there things that you want to continue doing? Hopefully you want to continue doing most things, but maybe like, day one order or day 15 order of 2025.
So day 15 orders, I think, would be seeing the foundation really just kind of grow up and bolster its ecosystem team. And that's why we've decided to make the decision to transfer the folks from labs into the foundation, so they have a much more consolidated view on how they operate, and the communication improves, and they can actually just drive things forward so quickly and so much more rapidly than things could be done before. So that's something that I think we're really, really excited about. And then from a labs perspective, we'll continue to focus on building those products and the infrastructure and the documentation and the tooling that helps developers to get started. But now, kind of with this, stronger foundation team in the ecosystem side that can go forward and conquer the world, where we focus more on the products, I think it's just going to be a perfect fit for us.
Yeah, I definitely want to talk about the ecosystem side of things, because that's, the heart of every blockchain, in my opinion. But I think in terms of Aptos's, there is a lot of ecosystem growth there. There was the demo day that happened recently, which we will discuss as well, with Enka. I believe I'm pronouncing that correctly.
That's right.
Yes.
So there's been a pretty strong developer community around Aptos for some time now. So there's the Alcove team, which has been holding hackathons in places in China, I think Shenzhen last year. There's also the Onchain Accelerator, which is a partnership with OKX. I think it's their first and only partnership with an L1 accelerator. So that's something that we were excited to be innovators with them on. And they recently had an event in New York City the past couple of weeks. I think today is the last day; it's kind of ending, where some really, really strong teams are building incredible products in the space, and I would definitely keep an eye on all of them. So there's Hyperfluid, there's Lucky, there's Mario, There is Plays Out and also the Mizu wallet. A couple of the key names I think that you want to watch out for in the future. But I think what we're excited about this accelerator is they can really do a good job of identifying and kind of putting together teams
Hmm.
that want to have very ambitious visions. Like if you talk to any of those founders, they're they're thinking about how to conquer the world, and our job is to help them get from that ideation stage to kind of launching to funding. Into successful token launches and beyond that.
Hmm.
Of course, profitability over time. And
Yeah.
that's something I'm really excited about.
Yeah. I think accelerator programs are extremely important for ecosystems. And like you said, they provide all these resources and tools and then hopefully sets them up for success. I know you've been at the recent accelerator program with Enka. What have you learned from engaging with these teams or even just, OKX on this front? What is it that you think has really kind of budded within the ecosystem that maybe hasn't before?
I think there's a lot of power in kind of people coming together. It
Hmm.
just, when a couple of people gather together that really have a lot of passion, it just shows. And so to see that passion ignite between teams. So it's not just like having one team here, one team there building independently, but when we get together and we can kind of discuss our goals, our objectives, and how we can help each other and complement each other, it just leads to a much stronger passion and outcome for everybody. And even myself, right? Like I'm there to definitely give them support, to ask what we can do to help. But as a part of that exchange, I'm getting excited about the things they're building, and I'm more motivated, even more than ever, to like help
Hmm.
us to partner and to grow what they're doing, both on the technical and non-technical side. So
Hmm.
it's a lot of fun and interesting for me. And I think what I've seen and heard from the teams as well is they're getting a lot of energy from understanding, wow, these are so many capabilities that Aptos can offer. It's not just like I can use their incredible products, but now I can like make asks. And if I need something, they can help us build, or we can partner together in this space. And there's just a sense of like, hey, we're bigger than just like one team. We're part of like an ecosystem, a community out there. I think when those kind of things take over, it snowballs into this incredible momentum that is hard to stop.
Hmm. When you're having conversations with these teams, especially within the accelerator program or just like ecosystems in general, what are you kind of learning that they're asking for in order to flourish? Like, what are the common asks that you're getting?
There's always a lot of asks about like VC funding. I think which we've
Mm,
done a pretty good job at in the past. I think there's also a lot of asks around support when it comes to even non-funding related things. And I can give you some examples. Sometimes it might be an ask of like, hey, I want to build this product. What do you think about the viability of this product in this space?
mm,
And the experience we can share, of course, is if we've heard of other products building in this space, like what are their lessons learned and what have they done well,
right.
what have they done well, and what can be improved on. So that's always interesting. I think what I also learned is people come in like very open to change in many ways. Like they come in, they've got a high level direction typically about like, hey, I really want to disrupt, the space of I don't know, loyalty platforms or like fan engagement apps. And I want to, I have a very clear path on how to do that, but maybe I don't understand the blockchain space so well. Like, so I need some help on how do you guys think about how would this interplay with DeFi? How does this interplay with kind of other apps in the Aptos ecosystem? And that's something we can definitely help with and connect them to the right people in the space. Whether it's, here's some dexes that are interesting. Here's some aggregators that are interesting. Here's how your token could be integrated into their platform and gain value and usage and adoption that way. And so a lot of it is also going to be a lot of matchmaking. So how do we kind of connect, different partners together with other partners that we think are very complementary, and they can collaborate together. And so that's, I think, something that has been also really fun to work with projects on.
Yeah, for sure. And obviously, Aptos is move based. How do you look at bringing non-move developers into the ecosystem, which is kind of, I think, a hard ask, or not a hard ask, but kind of a hard like thing to face, especially because like they're very developed on maybe on the EVM side, right? And so now you're saying,
Yeah.
hey, come learn this new language or come get into this. Are there bridges out there or programs where it's like, hey, you can still be an EVM developer and then come to Aptos or not yet?
Yeah, this is definitely a something in the space that a lot of people worry about, and I understand that worry completely.
Yeah.
when I step back at this as like from a programming perspective, like anyone who's kind of programmed before in the past, you never learn just one language. You started with something. You started with, I
Right.
don't know, maybe start with Java, and then they started to work on C++, and then they started
Right.
working on Rust or something like that. Um, I think it's definitely something that is like a more of a mental burden than like a actual like like there's a restriction here. I think also
Hmm.
Solana has proved that to some degree, right? Like Solana's success in the ecosystem has shown like, hey, if you want to, even though it's different than EVM, coding up in Rust is not a no. They can get a good number of developers to do that.
Right.
I would say for Move, Move is actually in my mind much easier than coding up on pure Rust with Solana.
Hmm.
It's much simpler, and we've already kind of seen that as the second fastest kind of growing ecosystem by the actual capital report, devs don't seem to have a problem so much with it. Like as long as you're kind of an open mind and you're willing to kind of learn new things, you can think about programming is really about translating an idea, an algorithm into code. And so whether it's this code base or that code base, the thing you're really doing is kind of that translation process. And so that it's coding is a tool to get the job done, but it's
Hmm.
not the main kind of thing. And I think once people start to play with Move, they start to realize like, hey, I really like Move, and it wasn't as hard as I thought. And now I've got the capabilities of the Aptos infrastructure underneath it that really enable new things I couldn't do before, because it's not Move that makes the cost cheap or a Move that makes it
Hmm.
more scalable and parallel. It is Move is an interface to accessing those capabilities of an underlying network.
Yeah.
And
No, that
so
makes sense.
you can definitely run Rust code on a Raspberry Pi. You can run it on a supercomputer. It has very different properties, and that's I think the way we like to think about it for Move.
Hmm. I think you could also probably just learn it through like AI, chat,
That's right.
GBT.
These days, things are
Yeah.
much easier, right? Like learning a new language, when I'm a bit older. So, you had to read a lot of books or kind of Google around to figure out how
Hmm.
to do things. I still do that to a large extent today. But if you want to, there's tools available now that make it much simpler to kind of even translate some of the initial algorithms into some kind of code structure that makes sense. And then like if you make small modifications to that code structure, things will probably just work.
Hmm.
So the difficulty of picking up a new language is like lower than ever now. And
Yeah.
to your point, it is something that we're excited about. And I think there are many people actually in the ecosystem are building out kind of different tools to either help you translate your code or translate your algorithms into kind of skeleton move code that you can then modify and then give to deploy extremely quickly.
Hmm. Out of all the sectors within the Aptos ecosystem, I personally see DeFi as like one of the biggest, if not the biggest. I don't know if you agree with me on that, but I'm curious to hear your thoughts more on what unique use cases you're seeing for DeFi on Aptos and that you really see kind of propelling it forward, especially as the DeFi industry continues to evolve and grow. And like you said, it is like the top one for the move-based ecosystem. So there's a lot of opportunity there. And you've partnered with a lot of major institutions and, crypto uh, firms as well. But I think DeFi is definitely like the top of line for Aptos. You could correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm curious your thoughts there. As many of you know, the Ethereum ecosystem is vast, but it's still extremely fragmented. Are you tired of how complicated it is to move assets across different chains? I know personally, I am. So with that said, I want you to meet Across, the most reliable, fastest, and cheapest bridge in the Ethereum ecosystem. Across has over 15 billion bridged and 1.7 million users. It's making cross-chain transactions simpler for everyone. Its intent-based design means users will get lightning-fast transfers between Ethereum and L2s like Base, Arbitrum, and Optimism in seconds, not minutes. For users, it's seamless bridging. For developers, it's providing native cross-chain integration. Across Protocol is erasing boundaries and unifying Ethereum. Experience the future of unified crypto infrastructure at across.to. That's across.to. Catch you all there.
I mean, I think DeFi is, I mean, this comes to maybe terminology a bit, but finance is definitely the top thing for Aptos. DeFi, a
Mm-hmm.
big component of that. There are just things you can do in Aptos you can't do elsewhere. So when you think about like Iconia's order book, their centralized, their club, it is something that can't be achieved anywhere else because of the fact that Aptos has the fastest and most performant shared state out there. And it uses something called dynamic parallelism to enable as much concurrency in the network as possible. And so the kind of throughput you can get on trading assets on something like an Iconia just can't be done elsewhere in the industry. And that we think is important because the more real time a system is when it comes to finance, the more liquidity that accumulates over time. Traders want it because they have more arbitrage opportunities compared to other trading systems. And those kind of advantages are something that, again, very unique to the platform. And yet we are not satisfied with. We're going to continue to push the envelope to make it faster, cheaper, and even include new capabilities that aren't possible.
Mhm.
So we're always looking for new things. One of the things that I think is interesting that we've been working on for some time is this notion of confidential token transfers. So the ability for you and I to transact, but have the transaction amount be hidden from anyone else in the network knowing. And that's what we're used to as a society, right? If I pay in cash to buy a hot dog, no one else knows about that transaction beside myself and the hot dog vendor. That's something that I think is kind of crucial for a lot of the payments use cases to take off, going beyond kind of the basics going forward.
Yeah.
So DeFi is definitely, DeFi as like how do we trade faster? How do we see assets move more quickly? And then the payments aspect, the remittance aspect, as well as the real world assets aspect is just a very complementary space that works well over
Mhm.
time.
You said that you're not yet satisfied here. Obviously, there's been a lot of work done, but what would have to be true in order to feel like it is a successful moment and you guys are at the top of the peak? Or maybe it's just always a new peak that you're climbing, right?
I mean, I think ultimately what we'd want to see one day is how do we get, I mean, again, if you think about more broadly, like a blockchain could be described as a decentralized exchange of assets, like
Mhm.
regardless of like it's a club, AMM, whatever. So a lot of the work there is also in the exploration of new things. So Aptos Intents is a kind of a new way to think about specifying your intention of what you want to have happen. For example, you want to convert some amount of USDC into some other asset, and you just put the order out there, and anyone can fill that order. Anyone can kind of put together a route across different DeFi products to make that order happen. And the routes can be extremely creative because the fees are so low, and the transact, that just allows a lot of possibilities out there. So it turns the blockchain into kind of one giant liquidity pool, one giant order book out there, and that I think is something that is pretty neat. Now, if you think about it that way, what we ultimately want to do is produce new opportunities that centralized exchanges can't really do, but also get as close to that performance of centralized exchanges. So you have this combination of kind of new opportunities for users to transact in this new ecosystem, but with the real time interface you're used to, like if you trade on a centralized exchange, it's extremely fast and performant. People don't realize that most of that can be done on a blockchain.
Mhm.
And if you produce like, right now we have the fastest block times in the industry, about 200 milliseconds per block. But if that was 100 milliseconds, 50 milliseconds, right now we're starting to see like like the time start to really, really get close from a user perception time to what a centralized exchange can do. And that starts to get very interesting in terms of disruption.
Mhm. How do you kind of explain the significance of that to people who are not in the industry? Because for our listeners, they'll probably understand and those within your ecosystem. But when you're going to talk to an enterprise business, an institutional business, they might be like, okay, this guy just threw big numbers at me, right? But like, what does it actually mean for me? And how can we like expedite and or improve upon the services that we already provide? So what would be like your conversation with them? Or
My
are they
conversation
smarter than I'm giving credit
No,
to?
I think most are quite understandable at this space. Like if you've played with the
Mhm.
products in the blockchain space, you'll see there's a huge difference in user experience compared to what these kind of more centralized products can do. And so I think this is something that's best demonstrated rather than even talked about. But if I can
Mhm.
show you how I can operate on a perps DEX, um, we can do something that is anyone within the restrictions of that perps DEX access can kind of log in and then like trade instantaneously with the same feeling of experience you would get on any centralized exchange.
Mhm.
That's a groundbreaking change. Like that allows so many more things to be done because now, rather than a centralized exchange, which has limited assets and limited access, you could imagine like these, for perp decks, you can have prices all over the world you can trade on at the same time with anyone around the world.
Yeah.
And that's a massive unlock for, I think, for society.
Yeah. DeFi aside, other sectors in Aptos that you're interested in and you see a lot of growth?
I do think that the payment space is just so big. Like I mentioned earlier, I think that having really, really cheap and fast payments unlocks a lot of value for new models of revenue generation. So if you're a streamer, you can think about tips-based models. You can think about um, maybe even unique hybrid models around subscriptions and tips as a way to kind of generate revenue going forward in the future. Uh, Leaderboards are interesting when it comes to public payments, and when it's private, maybe no leaderboards, but there's a lot you can do in that space. I would say the other thing that's interesting in the payment space is this, like, again, this notion of being able to kind of remittance corridors across different places where it's like US to Mexico or other corridors that are interesting. This kind of takes us back to our time in Libra and Diem and thinking through those use cases. But now we have much more powerful technology. It's much cheaper, it's faster and more scalable. And so if we can start to see stablecoins moving around to transact with high value use cases, that changes the game as well. So I think payments is definitely an area that we're really excited about to start to move the needle on now that the stables are all on board. They're going to the major exchanges, and you kind of get the last like end-to-end remittance kind of figured out on our end.
Yeah, on the stablecoin front, I know for a lot of people in crypto, it's kind of a safe haven, to transfer your asset from a volatile one and hopefully just park it there forever or take it out, bring it to the bank, or put it back into the market. For institutions, though, what are they looking to do with stablecoins on Aptos?
So I think there are different types of institutions that are interested in playing with stables and Aptos. Like some of them are very interested in the scale of it. I mean, so when they think about if you're an institution that's got a large customer base that transacts very frequently, one of the biggest concerns for them is, am I providing a user experience that my customers will be happy with? If the network goes down, if it's unstable, if it takes a long time for this transact when before it was very quick, like those are things I think that would hinder their user adoption story. And so a lot of these institutions also kind of dip their toes in there for that reason, right? They want to do a trial or do a test run. Often they might be disappointed by the way that crypto used to perform. But so sometimes sometimes interesting, like they'll just kind of come to us, like the larger institutions, and be like, look, we've tried some experiments with other networks. It didn't work out because the performance couldn't be met. And then we've seen what you can do, and we are excited to kind of partner with you on different things. So that's something that we love to see. And then financial institutions, I think a lot of them are, there are big ones, there are small ones. For some of the larger ones, they're definitely seeing the value of the assets going on chain when it comes to much more accountability, auditability is easier, and then having these assets over time being traded amongst a larger set of users is something that's very enticing to them. And then on this more ecosystem side of things, there's a lot of use cases, I think, with emerging markets in terms of money movement, in terms of the loans that I talked about. And then with the loans, you can think about very novel ways of paying those loans back, or even accepting kind of different currencies out there and transacting with, exchanging those currencies and foreign exchange and all that stuff. So it becomes a very interesting, unique space to innovate in. So it's pretty broad-based.
Yeah. Are those things actually happening now?
These are all things happening now. I want to give more details on them, but I think
Have to ask. Okay. What other sectors do you think would be great to be tapped into that haven't been already? Like something that you keep thinking like, wow, this would be amazing if a team just came and built this on Aptos.
We're pretty excited about AI and crypto in general. So I think a lot of days these are like mostly AI agents that are kind of almost DeFi related AI agents, where you can think of it almost as the next kind of version of meme coins. And that's cool. And that's interesting, but
it works.
It does work. It does work. And I think this is very complementary to what we're working on with the trading use cases, because if you are launching AI agents and seeing those assets being able to be traded then on a high fidelity platform and with liquidity and all that stuff, it is going to be a very complementary effort for us. So definitely interested in seeing. We've been dabbling a lot with AI agents. I know the community's been playing into a lot. They're very excited about what AI can do in this space. And AI, the AI agents piece is really interesting from a consumer standpoint. From a developer standpoint, we've talked through that move development can be much simpler with AI agents, kind of helping to translate that code or giving suggestions, even suggesting different syntax, or even perhaps what we call the formal specifications to make sure your Move code is doing the right things. The extra check that Move has on Aptos for ensuring that your properties are upheld. But the AI space in general just needs a lot of exploration. And I think the first use cases will definitely be for AI agents and the both the kind of meme coin aspect as well as the trading aspect. And so seeing a lot of excitement in that area. And I'm really, really curious to see how that space shakes out in the coming months.
Yeah, for sure. I feel like there's a lot that can come on that front, especially. I mean, we've seen a lot of developments in crypto and AI in general, but it's kind of evolving into a very big avalanche where there's a bunch of different possibilities that I don't think were possible before. So, but yeah, on the BD front of things, I feel like in 2024, Aptos had a lot of developments. We were covering a lot of different things across a lot of different sectors. And I say this in the best way possible. One of my favorite ones was the Kid Labs one, where it was the ticketing, because I think that's just such a duh partnership and a thing where like every person out there can understand this, they could use this, and it's not like shoving blockchain technology in their face, right? I'm curious to hear, out of all the partnerships that happened last year, reflecting on it, which ones stand out to you as you were really proud of it? And I know you're proud of all of them,
I am.
so I'm going to
You're
beat you to that. But I think looking back, for me, that was one that I was like, this is special. And I also think the Expo one in Japan was really meaningful, because that's like a mainstream thing where people are getting these wallets, but they don't necessarily know, or maybe they do, that it's a crypto wallet, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of partners are like have different things that we're looking for from them. So, Kid Labs is an amazing team, hardworking, very, very hardworking team. Trying to revolutionize the ticketing space. It's not just taking notes, like loyalty, it's fan engagement,
Yeah.
it's all of that, right? And so there's that the market is actually, I'm surprised not more people are doing this, honestly, because the market is ripe for disruption. With right now, it's very hard for people that hold events to kind of connect directly to their customers. It's very hard for those events like to kind of even like how do they get started, because the event I don't know, venues have so much control over how things
Yeah.
are handled and managed, and the relationships that are involved in that process. And so seeing that become more decentralized over time is kind of a natural evolution of that. And it just allows different parties to connect. I mean, so for people that kind of remember back in the day, if you bought like I don't know, a basketball ticket and your favorite team won, on the back of it would be like, we can go to Taco Bell and kind of get a free
Yes,
taco
yes.
on this night. And that is just like a one-off experience, but you can now imagine how anybody can take that same thing and be like, look, if you went to this experience with Kid Labs or somebody else in New York City on this particular day, you can go ahead and get a free Dunkin' Donut, or you can go get a free coffee at this place. And
Right.
that's that they don't need to coordinate with Kid Labs.
Yeah, it's
They can
just
just do that
there.
on their own. And
Hmm.
just because they know that this group might be the right group to target for those kind of particular coupons or those particular events. So that is really exciting, I think, for us to think about how blockchain kind of connects different industries together in a permissionless way and allows users to be able to access those industries, without permission.
Hmm. Yeah. To wrap things up, I want to do a lot more talking on looking ahead into 2025. Obviously, we are in 2025, and we talked a little bit about it in the beginning. On the BD front, with partnerships and everything, are there certain types of partnerships that you're looking to have this year? You don't have to name names. You can,
Yeah.
of course,
Okay.
but specific sectors, dream partnerships. What are you thinking?
We're really looking for anything that's going to help move the needle in the trading space, the payments remittance space, as well as the RWA asset space. And that's the things that we're having a lot of inbound, which is great. We're also in discussions with a lot of different teams on so many different aspects of these areas. I think the hardest part is to kind of figure out like how far along people are. I mean, are they more in the experimental early phases, or are they kind of like very determined and driven? They got
Right.
a team spun up and they really want to move the needle forward here. That's probably our biggest challenge. I think there's a lot of opportunities in this area to move the needle forward, but at the same time, it's a balance, right? Of resourcing and time and energy. And a lot of our energy is going to be going towards the disruptors, the innovators, those that come from the ecosystem to try to move the ball forward here. Um, and supporting a lot of the kind of Web3 natives. So it's a lot of it's a balance, but it's a lot of fun.
Hmm. Yeah. On the Aptos roadmap for 2025, there's probably a million things in a good way.
Yeah.
But in order to move the needle forward for the network, what would you say are the top priorities, non-negotiables?
Yeah, non-negotiables are going to be a couple things. So one is like we have Move 2, which is launched and announced earlier this, like late last year, early this year. Now the framework is actually deployed with Move 2, which is a huge optimization unlock, so people can link into that with their new code. There's a lot of new features coming in Move 2 as well. And from all the kind of response we've gotten from developers so far, they love it. It changes their code in a much better way. It's so much simpler for them to do things. Everyone is a huge, huge fan of that. And so we'll see Move 2 kind of dominating the developer space as it kind of continues to get pushed out over time. The other thing is we have some key technologies around increasing our throughput even further, which also in turn will lower cost. That's the Block STM V2 work we talked about in Korea. That's making great progress. The idea is that we can go from maxing out maybe at 32, 64 cores on a single machine to taking advantage of going to even 256 cores, which is the future of the way hardware works, right? Every year you kind of see the number of cores or processing power doubling on a single infrastructure out there. The final piece is we have something called Raptor, which is our new consensus protocol that's rolling out. Only our team could probably have a consensus protocol deployed in research called Show++, which is so great that we actually aren't deploying, but something even better that is in the works to push that forward. And there's some new secretive things which we have not yet announced. The one thing I'll say earlier in the year we did do, and we talked a little bit about, but a blog post is coming, is something called Consensus Observer. Not the most sexy name, but what's sexy about it is that it reduces the latency for users by 100 milliseconds in the kind of normal case. And in the case in which the blockchain has high load on it, it might even cut latency by 40%. So that's something that we're really excited about kind of delivering already along the latency efforts going forward. And something that people don't understand is like, why do you keep pushing on latency? Why do you keep pushing on throughput? Every time you kind of increase this scale, you enable a new set of applications that weren't possible before.
Yeah.
There's a nice, paper that kind of was shown recently, I think, or not recently, but maybe a while back that Google published showing that when you cut search results times by even 100 milliseconds, you retain a lot more searchers, you retain a lot more people trying to use the website, and also generally increasing revenue for the infrastructure is a plus. So every bit we can do to kind of push the needle in terms of what's possible in Web3 allows those new use cases, allows more of the 5 billion internet customers to actually leverage Web3. And I think, like I said, we have some new plans for Aptos, which we're not quite ready to ship yet.
We'll talk about it later for sure.
Those are the ones that I think that are going to be like very, very massively improving the capabilities of what the network can do for supporting specific use cases around trading.
Yeah, I agree with you on the front that even just like a small change and small improvement, like 1% improvement every single day is like, it compounds over time by a lot, so everything counts in my opinion. And it does turn into something much, much bigger than how we even explain it today. You obviously are heavily involved in the broader crypto ecosystem, Aptos space, but you talk to a lot of people, you see a lot of things. What would you like to see the crypto ecosystem, more broadly speaking, evolve into?
Well, that's a good question. One thing I'll say in this space is that I'm extremely happy when I see our technology getting adopted by other places. And so whether the adoption of Block STM, the adoption of Movement Aptos by other networks, even people, kind of calling out like, hey, this consensus protocol is cool, we're using a variant of it, is something that I enjoy, because like that moves the whole industry forward. That allows us to get more users. And so been happy to see a lot of adoption of that technology in the space from what the Aptos team has been building, and kind of showing like why, how we can kind of work together in different areas. Like we can be very collaborative. It's not PvP all the time, right?
Yeah.
That being said, I would like to see a coalescence around, right now there's a big expansion of networks in some sense. Like more networks are being launched every single day, which is great. Like a lot of experimentation is happening out there, but over time, I would like to see kind of users, continue to build big user bases on, smaller number of networks, so they can actually gain the value of those networks. Because right now, if we're all spread out everywhere, it's not the greatest user experience. It's really hard for us to kind of manage assets everywhere in the world and then think about, well, this network has these properties, so has these properties. The cognitive dissonance is really tough to manage. Thinking about, kind of what the security of this property is and what the security of this network is, and what issues are there. I'd like
Mhm.
to see us, get to a world where like technology does eventually kind of stabilize. We see the use cases materialize, and in particularly apps need to build. Like we want to see who are the Web3 kind of Netflixes and Amazons and YouTubes of our generation, our time, that will pop up. Obviously, it'll be different products, it'll be different spaces, but bringing that kind of value that those products do bring to users should be is definitely possible in Web3, and we want to see those happen. And everything we do in Aptos is to accelerate that. The way we accelerate it is through building the best infrastructure out there, and now again, like really doubling down on how do we support the ecosystem to get to those places in the future is a key thing for us.
Yeah, 100%. Avery, last major thing I'm going to ask you is if you can leave us with a piece of advice, maybe for those looking to build in the Aptos ecosystem, and advice that you've carried with you throughout your time in this industry.
Um, my biggest advice to myself and to others is we need risks. We need to kind of, there's no reward without taking risks, and we got to keep pushing the envelope, and that means pushing the envelope in products, in infrastructure, in even the way we think about organizational structures and how we can operate effectively. And those risks will ultimately pay off in achieving that kind of Web3 applications that haven't been there yet.
All right. Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you, Avery, for your insightful comments and taking the time to talk today. I'm looking forward to diving into Aptos again next quarter.
Thanks, Jasmine.